Now, what I'd say to you as well is that when it comes to knowledge, this is another trap I think a lot of us fall into, is believing that we can't take action unless we have all the knowledge. Until we read all the books, have all the information, and then we'll know what we should do. Now again, going back to my early fiction writing career, I found that what I used to do was I used to read loads and loads of books about fiction writing. But what I found was that when I actually got into writing fiction, I found a lot of that knowledge was useless to me. It wasn't relevant. That the topics that these people were talking about were things that never came up as I was writing my books. And I found that I actually learned more on the job than I did from the books. And you may find that as well too, that what you're going to find is that whatever knowledge you have right now, all this knowledge that you're stockpiling in your head, is not going to be relevant to you. Because sometimes when we read books, we read about someone else's journey and the problems that they had. Now you're going to find that your journey is going to be different than that other person, because you're probably in a different country. You could be a different sex. This person could be, their book could be written maybe 30 years ago or whatever. So your journey right now is completely different than theirs. And even though they may have laid out all the steps in their book of how they got from where they were to writing their fiction book, you're going to find that when you show up today that your journey is going to be different, because everything is different between the two of you. So you're going to find that you're actually going to learn more on the job as you are actually taking action. And sometimes, yes, you might come up against a kind of a dead end where you say to yourself, well, how do I get past this part? And then what I used to do in my fiction writing was I used to come to that part. I used to go and look for the answer to that question, find the answer, come back to my writing, and then continue along until I came to the next part where I was stuck, and then go find the solution to that. So what I was doing was I was simply just taking enough knowledge just to keep me going, rather than actually filling my head with more knowledge than I actually needed, which was going to hold me back. Because sometimes having too much knowledge can actually be a burden. Because when you realize sometimes what you're getting into, you realize and say to yourself, well, there's no way I can do that. There's no way I could do that. And I think the reason I probably wrote my first fiction book was because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know all the steps. I didn't know how hard it was to sell a book. I didn't know how hard it was to come up with storylines and all those different things. I didn't know all that. And I think that worked to my benefit. So I'd say that as well too, is just don't fill your head with knowledge. You might feel that it's helpful to you, but it mightn't be relevant to you. And sometimes having all that knowledge and knowing what's ahead of you might stop you.